Greetings, everybody. Greetings. I'm so glad you could join me tonight. I am Reverend Sandy Album. I am the interim rector here at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in East Longmeadow, Massachusetts. And on every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, I am here to read a bedtime story to you. So tonight our story is called In God's Name, and it's by Sandy Eisenberg Sasso. And it is illustrated by Phoebe Stone. And the illustrations in this book are absolutely wonderful. This book, In God's Name. In God's Name begins with a quote from the Pesquita de Ravacana. The voice of God is in the uniqueness of each and every person, the Holy One said. Do not be confused because you hear many voices. Know that I am one and the same. Look at these beautiful illustrations. After God created the world, all living things on earth were given a name. The plants and the trees, the animals and the fish, and each person, young and old, had a special name. But no one knew the name for God. So each person searched for God's name. The farmer, whose skin was dark like the rich brown earth from which all things grew, called God the source of life. I think we can understand why the farmer would say source of life, because we all need food, and farmers grow food so that we can have a source of energy in our lives. So it makes sense that the farmer would call God the source of life, don't you think? The girl whose skin was golden as the sun that turned night into day called God creator of light. Creator of light. The man who tended sheep in the valley called God. Can you think of what the man who tended sheep in the valley called God? We hear God called this all the time in our tradition. He called God shepherd. Shepherd. I bet you've heard that psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. The tired soldier who had fought too many wars called God maker of peace. Maker of peace. And that is what the soldier prayed for, was peace. It's what we all pray for, that we might live in peace together. So it makes sense to call God maker of peace. The artist who carved figures from the earth's hard stone called God my rock. My rock, the artist who carved from stone. Look at these beautiful figures, all kinds, faces and dancers and shapes carved from the stone. Sometimes the people who called God by different names were puzzled. They said, every living thing has a single name, the marigold, the pansy, and the lily, the oak tree, the sequoia, and the pine. Do you know what a sequoia is? It's a huge, one of the largest trees on earth. God must have a single name that is greater and more wonderful than all names. Can you name all the things in this picture? What do you see? I see flowers. I see acorns. I see a bird. Who's up there in the tree? It looks like, let's see. Oh, it looks like a cat that's up in the tree with the boy. God must have a single name that is more wonderful than all other names, they said. Each person thought his name for God was the greatest one. Each person thought her name for God was the very best. The farmer who called God source of life said, this is the true name for God. The girl who called God creator of light insisted, this is the most splendid name for God. The shepherd, soldier, and artist believed they all had the perfect name for God. But no one listened, least of all, God. So each person kept searching for God's name. They're all searching for God's name. What name do you call God? Think about that tonight. What name do you call God? Sometimes at the end of the day, I call God comfort. When I'm at home with my husband and we're enjoying a television program together, it feels very comfortable. Let's see, the woman who cared for the sick called God healer. And the slave who was freed from bondage called God redeemer. Healer. It's opposite sides when I'm looking at the camera. Healer and redeemer. Are you still thinking about what your name for God would be on this night? The grandfather whose hair was white with the years called God Ancient One. Ancient One. And the grandmother who was bent over with age and sorrow, she called God Comforter. Like I said, Comforter. The young woman who nursed her newborn son called God Mother. And the young man who held the hand of his baby daughter called God Father. And the child who was lonely called God Friend. All the people called God by different names. They tried to tell one another that their name was the best, the only name for God, and that all other names were wrong. But no one listened, least of all God. And so each person just kept searching for God's name. You see that boy up in the tree? Looking out at the stars, I wonder what he's going to call God. And then one day, the person who called God Ancient One, and the one who called God Friend, and the one who called God Mother, and the one who called God Father, and all the people who called God by a different name came together, and they knelt by a lake that was clear and quiet like a mirror. It was God's mirror. Can you see their mirror reflections in the lake? Even the trees are reflected in the lake and the flowers. God's mirror. And then each person who had a name for God looked at all the others who had a different name, and they looked into God's mirror and they saw their own faces. And they saw the faces of all the other people that were there. And they all called out their names for God. Source of life, creator of light, shepherd, maker of peace, my rock, healer, redeemer, ancient one, comforter, mother, father, and friend. And they did it all at the same time. Can you imagine everybody shouting out their name for God all at the same time? I think that's pretty amazing. At that moment, as they all shouted out those names at the same time, all the people knew that all the names for God were good, and no name was better than any other. And then all at once, their voices came together, and they called God One. They called God One. And everyone listened. Most of all, God. Was your name for God in that list of names? The names for God are so many that we could never count them all. And so it makes sense that one is the name for God, because God is one God for all of us. No matter who we are, no matter where we come from, that one God loves us, cares for us, cares for God's creation, which is us. I hope you enjoyed In God's Name. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. And so between now and then, let us take time to pray. Let us take time to pray for those who need God's help, who need our help, to be God's feet and hands and heart in the world. So tonight, as you say your prayers in the name of God that you know today, because the name of God you know tomorrow may be different. And we all know that God is one God who loves us all. Good night. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. Be well, take care, God bless.